Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to start today's webinar. Welcome, welcome. Really pleased that many of you could be with us. I can see some of you have already discovered the chat window. Thank you so much for saying hello. Today's session is called Enhanced Engagement, the science and strategy of using AI to boost field performance. I've been really looking forward to this session for quite some time. It's been very popular, got several hundred of you signed up. I'm looking for a good discussion today, not just a one-way discussion. I want you guys to be part of that discussion as well. So if you haven't already, open that chat window, say hello, tell us who you are, where you're from, and maybe even what you're interested in finding out about in today's session. Let's make this a dialogue, as I say. Just a quick word from me on why. Why did we decide to do this? Well, obviously, AI is at the forefront of everybody's lips right now. But what we really want is the practicalities. And what we really want is how we can actually see the dials moving, see the impact, see the numbers improving. And what I'm hoping for today is that we actually have a relatively practical discussion about what to do, what's working, what isn't working, and even behind the curtain, a little bit of how the technology itself is working. So don't go anywhere. I think it's going to be a really fun session. This webinar is going to combine the idea of AI, artificial intelligence, with HI, human intuition. We're not saying one or the other. We're advocating for a combined world where we are enhancing one another's performance. That's really the use of the word enhanced on this session. We also want to see it make an impact for our customers. It doesn't mean anything unless we're actually engaging better, and those better things are a measurable effect. So the good news is that it's not just me that's going to be presenting to you today. I've got some lovely people who will be revealing themselves very shortly. Let me just quickly introduce them. David is the founder and CEO of Kai. That's an AI-driven conversation intelligence platform. And obviously, really pleased that David could be here as the founder and CEO, because he's going to be able to explain some of the stuff behind the scenes, as I said already. 20 years of experience in engineering successful customer experience related programs, actually worked outside of pharma as well. We all know how valuable that is. Companies like Royal Mail, Vodafone, British Gas, other industries as well. So thank you so much, David, for being here. Phil, many of you will know back from his days in AstraZeneca, but he's now head of business transformation at NeoOptima, someone I've known for a while, and very much appreciate that he is with us today. He's got more than 25 years of experience altogether in healthcare. He's worked across pharma, across agencies, a very much 360-degree perspective of some of the most pressing challenge. And I've always liked Phil for his pragmatism and ability to get to the source of what we need to do to actually make a difference. So Phil, really appreciate that. Sarah is finally in one of my webinars. Really pleased to have you, Sarah. You've seen her grace the stage at Pharmageddon, or maybe one of the other events I've been running. She's a genuine innovator. She really does want to move the needle when it comes to new experiences and new ways which we can engage our customers. She's the Nordic Digital Director at Novartis, as you know. She's actually got experience across industries other industries as well, everything from journalism to pharma, of course, to hospitality, and is a real passionate advocate of technology as we go forward. So thank you so much for being here. Chris, another person I've wanted at one of my webinars for a long time, finally made it happen. Chris is excellent on stage. I hope we're going to see that today. He's generally one of the smartest people in any room that he's in. He's working at Amgen in the UK. He's a genuine commercial leader, I would say, in the space. He's very much been responsible for the design and operational delivery for much of the capabilities that we see at Amgen today in terms of sales and marketing. Obviously fascinated by the intersection of people and technology. So you are in the right room, Chris. An absolute pleasure to have you here too. Right. So some of you might remember that when you signed up for today's webinar, you had to ask one or two extra questions. I wouldn't make it easy for you now, would I? Let's see the results of those questions. The first one is on your screen right now. Would you describe your organization's current progress in implementing AI for enhancing HCP's interactions? So you can see the various different answers. 7% we've not considered. You can see it's a reasonable reasonable distribution, but 24%, the largest, nearly a quarter of people saying we're currently exploring the potential benefits and challenge. So you can see a bit of a normal distribution there with most of us in the middle. I think that's probably what we would expect. We also asked another question: which aspect of AI integration poses the greatest challenge to your organization? What is the most challenging thing? With nearly a third of people saying aligning AI initiatives with existing tech infrastructures. So moving it into the stack that we all operate. Of course, that's going to be an effort, but change management also just over 20% there as well. The people side of the same equation, I think you could probably say. Now, I want you guys to, as I already said at the beginning, be very much a part of this discussion, and I wouldn't want you just sitting passively. So if you look at your screen right now, I'm going to actually open a question for you immediately. In fact, it's a two-part question, so don't just ignore the second part. The first part, as you can see, is: where do you see the greatest potential for AI to impact field performance in the next 3 years? Where do you see the greatest potential? And I've got a few options for you there. The second part: who will benefit the most from these investments? Who will benefit the most? So make sure you answer both parts. If you look at your screen, you'll also see a little QR code if you're interested in future webinars on this topic and others. Make sure you check that out and sign up for those. And I'm going to actually ask our panel now to turn their cameras on. And let's get this discussion going. Just 10 more seconds. I'm holding this question open for, so make sure you get your answers in. I can see roughly half of you are still awake. Half of you are taking a moment to answer it. Okay, gonna get rid of the slides. Marvelous, marvelous. Okay, 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. Got nearly all of you in the end. That's good. Good to see everyone's awake. Okay, the results. The potential. Where do you see the greatest potential? So a third of people saying improving content and delivery within calls. Well, thanks for answering that one, because that's the focus of today's session. So that's really good, isn't it? That came up first. 28% say enhancing the precision of targeting, choosing the right HCPs in the first place. Obviously, next best action systems a lot. Optimizing timing and frequency, also something in next best action. So that's good. Who will benefit the most? Interesting. Frontline sales getting more than a third of the vote as well. Medical liaisons and their managers not far behind. That one's quite an even distribution actually on the second tier. So that's really, really interesting. Okay. Panel, I would love to hear your reaction to what you've just seen on the panel here, and indeed your sort of thoughts on what's frustrating you the most with the existing situation that potentially technology could help solve. And I'm looking mainly to Chris and Sarah to kick off the conversation with, since they both work in pharma today. So who of you would like to kick off?
I can start, Paul.
Go for it, Sarah.
Welcome, everyone. Really great to be here, and thank you for inviting me on this webinar, Paul. Great passion of mine. How do we work more with AI and also use it to innovate and also use it to drive, optimal outcomes with us in our industry? But I have to say, I really relate to what we see in the polls, that often it's change management, it's the resistance to change that is often one of, how I see it, one of the biggest roadblocks or the biggest challenges that we have. And I've seen it now as we go into Gen AI in the pharmaceutical industry, but I've also seen it also in the telecommunications industry. So before it was the Gen AI hype, actually, if I bring you back to about 8 years ago, if anyone remembers big data, when we started using a lot of industries started using big data, incorporating big data into next best action and also optimizing sales calls. And I remember it as clearly as I see it now, the resistance to change. What does it mean for the frontline staff? And ultimately, I think, if we address that and if we hold people's hands and we address change management and how to use this new technology, could also help utilization within the industry. I don't know, Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great point, Sarah. So Paul knows I'm kind of passionate about the whole subject of field engagement and how our field force is evolving. Preparing for today's webinar, I thought the best thing to do, shocking though it might seem, is to go and ask some of them. So I did spend a little bit of time earlier this week making a few phone calls to colleagues of mine. It's interesting because the same themes kept coming through, right? Actually, irrespective of whether I was talking to sales teams, market access, medical, and that's interesting in and of itself, right? Maybe the nature of what the teams do, isn't as divergent as it might have been traditionally in our industry. But clever science came through, right? We have complex novel mechanisms of action in our medicines, highly targeted treatments, etc. There's a real belief in our industry still that complex science requires a human-to-human conversation, right? That's a very sacred thing. And there is concern about bringing technology into that context and into that space, that it must do good if we do that, right? The team talked about the evolving care pathways. I think irrespective of which country you're in, you're going to see that care pathways are evolving. Care is moving out of acute settings, and that changes the nature of the work that we do in our industry, the services we provide, and the conversations our customer-facing teams have. Access to medicines is a big one. There are multiple barriers to overcome: clinical, financial, behavioral, etc. All of those barriers shape the daily work that our customer-facing teams are doing, and therefore, the value proposition we're trying to bring through. And actually, value proposition also came through loud and clear, right? Lovely comment from one of my colleagues: we have permission to sell. Do we have permission to partner? That kind of stuck with me. Although it might sound a little cliche, it resonated a lot. The channel mix is an interesting one as well. Paul does lots of webinars on channel mix, so I won't take us down that rabbit hole today. Disrupted during the pandemic, we had some new paradigms. Have they stuck? If not, why not? All of those things, I think, for me, mean that the role and capability of the field force is evolving and will continue to. And different companies will be at different stages in their journey of how they evolve to address that. But I think what's universal and what's true of all of us in the industry is that it moves the goalpost in terms of what we're asking our customer-facing teams to do, why we're asking them to do it, and therefore how we evaluate their impact. And I know with the work that David and Phil do, that's key, right? If you don't really understand what it is that you need your customer-facing teams to be doing, how could you ever introduce an AI or technology into that space? And satisfactorily analyze and measure and assess the impact of the work that the teams do. Maybe just, Paul, if I'm allowed, I'd love to touch a little bit on maybe the resistance and skepticism towards new technologies as well. And Sarah, it'd be great to get your views on this as well, because it might not be universally popular opinion, particularly on this call today, but actually, when it comes to generative AI, I actually think some of the resistance is not unjustified. So, we know that generative AI has bias. So do humans, by the way, but we know that generative AI has bias. If your key account manager or your MSL has a regional accent, could there be gender bias? Could there be age bias if we're using this technology in certain contexts and for certain purposes? How are we going to overcome that? We know that there's an issue with hallucination in AI, fabrication of outputs. We know that there's still some lack of transparency. The generative AI, large language models, they're a little bit of a black box, and it's not always clear how they arrive at their output. There's still a big reliance on training data and getting that right. That's been some of our early experience in experimenting with developing Gen AI chatbots and tools within Amgen, actually, is that if your training data isn't solid, then you're always going to struggle to build an effective application and solution. And maybe the one that's most interesting to this conversation today, when we think about customers and the interaction with customers, healthcare professionals, nurses, etc., is nuance. So, my own experience, and I'm by no means a technology expert here, is that Gen AI can sometimes struggle with tasks that require nuanced judgment and deep reasoning. But But what we've just described is the large majority of discussions that are happening between a member of our industry or our profession and a healthcare professional, right? So if we're using generative AI in that context to evaluate the sentiment of a customer, for example, how reliable is that output going to be? That would be my question, because if we can't stand by that, then you can kind of understand why there might be some skepticism or some resistance where we're trying to bring these technologies into our teams and into our organizations. So those are just a few thoughts, I guess, and some of the challenges that
yeah. Thank you, Chris. You've pretty much outlined a large part of the contents for our webinar in one go there, which is great actually, because we definitely want to come back to that bias and nuance question later on. I just want to quickly understand whether you, and obviously Sarah, keen to hear you on this as well, whether or not we've got that mindset question in check. So, you think that it's fine for there to be some resistance towards AI for very legitimate reasons, but I do want to know if you think that we are embracing it when it comes to the commercial call performance as readily as we should be. So just give me a quick perspective on any frustrations that you have around that.
No. That feels like a simple one word. No, there's absolutely more we can do. I think we need to proceed with caution, but there's absolutely more we can do.
I echo you there, Chris, and I think when I think about the valid points that you've raised, I also think we tend to overcomplicate things in pharma. We tend to add in, what about the patient? What about this? What about that? If we take it back down to its core, essentially it's about how do we effectively utilize the data to bring a holistic point of view to get us to the next where we want to be. If that could be next best action, it could be stepping along the adoption ladder, it could be wherever. But if we look at, and if we strip it back before AI is the machine learning, could we even strip it back? If there is resistance, could we look at how we're able to effectively utilize data to optimize field force engagement? Because at the moment, if we look at it traditionally, and also I guess a lot of people could recognize this, that we have manual processes, face-to-face meetings, phone calls, and we're not connecting that data. And if we were to do that as the first step, perhaps in machine learning or advanced analytics before moving to sort of AI, then you'll see already great steps which will get that buy-in from the organization to go even further.
Yeah. So thank you to everybody who is commenting in the chat. That's a good and healthy conversation, which we like to see. I would love to get Phil's perspective on this, as you can obviously see across different customers, both on this adoption issue and also another point that Chris made was about, do we know what we're trying to achieve before we go there and get it? And I'd love to know if you think, from your perspective, Phil, if you think there's a problem of leadership as well, like or a problem of knowing what we don't know and actually having a vision of what we're trying to get to across companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think the positive is that 1/3 of the people so far on the poll have said there is an opportunity here. I think the frustration for me on these points is when you look at other parts of the pharmaceutical industry, clinical, regulatory, highly regulated areas, they're using a lot of AI and data science and machine learning, etc. And I feel that the sales, marketing, and maybe the medical side are lagging. It's been looked at for AI content, as we've heard. But I think there is a big opportunity here. When you look outside pharma and you look at sports science, sports science areas, athletes, etc., use a lot of data science to actually improve their performance. So I think there's an opportunity to enhance the science and AI what we do as humans. I think the other frustration is, and I think it is a leadership issue, is we all know the model's a bit broken. I mean, it's not great for a CAM or an MSL to have coaching every 5, 6, 7 weeks and expect behavioral change. And I think if we all of us looked at our children, you learn to swim, you normally get observed by a coach. Looking to play an instrument, you get observed. If you're playing a team sport, you get observed more regularly than every 5 or 6 weeks. So to me, we all know that's not a great way to improve behavioral change. We'll come on to that a bit later. So I think that's the frustration, that it is a leadership challenge, like many things. But you look at other regulated industries, banking, insurance, they've moved to these areas and actually use them very, very well in terms of AI conversation intelligence to enhance a human, not to replace. I think that's the key, is how you augment it. I think the leadership challenge is there. And I think one of the unknowns, and I've done a bit of work on this before, as you know, Paul, around remote and digital change management.
Yeah.
Is that we need to educate some of the leadership teams around what is possible. There are some very senior people at some of the pharma companies we know. Paul Hudson at Sanofi has put this on, AI is the center of improving efficiency and effectiveness as an organization at that company. So I think it's a leadership challenge that we need to drive forward and actually move into commercial and medical in this area.
And even if leaders are saying, like Paul Hudson, that we want to embrace this technology, we want to be experimental in this technology, would you even argue that they still struggle to have a vision here? And by the way, I'm going to get the audience to ask a little bit of a question on this. So you will have just seen a little question pop up, which I've called value. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, as it's directly relevant to what we're talking about right now. Is there a clear destination or vision, not just excitement about the possibilities? I'll open that question to anyone that wants to.
I think everything there is. I think you need to have a roadmap to where you're going to take it, because obviously, like Chris has said earlier, Sarah said, there is a reluctance or a hesitation to adopt. So I think you have to build a plan and a roadmap for that. And I think that does need some of the leaders to have a greater vision to how they can embed it over time. I think that's key. And with no doubt that we've all experienced working with some of the clients we work with, that you need to critically build that roadmap to kind of share that vision and therefore see where it's going to go over time. There are some companies that are jumping on board very fast and actually are looking to, roll this sort of capability out across 20, 30 markets, and others that haven't even started, as we've seen on the poll.
Yeah.
Phil, I just wonder as well whether there's a bit of like do as I say versus do as I do kind of that dynamic as well. I think it's relatively easy, and not to downplay Paul Hudson's admirable ambition at Sanofi and for the industry, but I think it's relatively easy for CEOs in 2024 to talk the talk, because we're all looking at the just ridiculous pace of development and investment in this area, right? I just wonder if those leaders and their leaders and their leaders, our organizations are pyramids invariably. Are they willing to role model? Are they willing to adopt AI themselves, when they're pushing it down into their teams? If we suspect that, for example, our customer-facing teams, our field teams, might feel some discomfort or some resistance to the idea that AI augments what they do, to your point, or provides some observation and assessment of their performance, then are our leaders prepared to do that to themselves before they do it to their teams? Would be kind of an interesting experiment, right?
Totally. I think it needs to be rolled the other way, which is actually, do we think we're doing justice to our CAMS and MSL teams to actually be only coaching them every sort of 5, 6, 7 weeks? And I think, well, is there a better way of supporting them in their growth? Which, at the end of the day, most field teams are still the main channel currently for most companies to drive forward. I think there's a piece around reversing and saying, actually, how do we better support the CAMS and MSLs? And therefore, the leaders realize that's better for them individually. And that's part of the change management, as opposed to they're being done unto. Yeah.
I want to hear David's perspective on this. He's been waiting patiently.
Yes,
thanks.
A
comparison with other industries as well. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. I mean, I think the broader AI adoption question that you're asking there, we know from all the from many studies that, if you start to use AI across the enterprise in your tasks, you can increase, personal productivity by 25% plus. So, I think the challenge for organizations setting a vision for using AI is twofold. Is firstly, you want that bottom up. So you want individuals to start adopting tools like Copilot that can guide and give them productivity gains. At the same time, you also need a top-down approach with the leadership, which is what you guys were saying, which actually they need to role model, they need to adopt it, because they could be more effective by using AI productivity tools. And then you've got to try and find tangible use cases where actually, having experimented and tried it a little bit, you find out that it does work. And then you need to scale it rapidly across the organization, because ones and twos of people doing it isn't going to give you the scale benefits that you want. And we'll get on to talk about conversation intelligence and how that can be deployed at scale and massively accelerate performance. So we'll get to the content of that. But I think that general approach is the challenge all organizations have. If you don't adopt AI, you're going to get left behind. It's that simple. And if everyone else is getting 25% productivity gains across all parts of the value chain, then which is what's happening in pharma, and you've seen it just in the drug development side of pharma, let alone then going, well, if we can do it there, we should be able to do it everywhere. And you absolutely can. So then you go, well, if you want to keep up, then you've got to adopt. and some of those, and then you get to the change challenge about adoption.
David, I
Which
want
is,
you to give us an idea, though. Sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
how is Pharma doing? How are we compared to others that you get to work with? Because you've got that perspective, unlike probably 90% of the people in this room.
Yeah, no, I think well, clearly on the drug development side, leading globally, but actually on the commercial side, lagging globally.
Okay. Probably no surprises there. I'm going to end this poll. Thank you very much for everyone who attended. Let's have a quick look at the results. I think that in all of my time running many webinars, I don't think I've ever seen such an evenly distributed set of results. So we've got I don't think you can really learn anything from this other than lots of different things are what we want. So of course everyone will have wanted to tick every single item on this, but I'm generally evil. I only allow you to choose one. But interestingly, how even those indeed were. Okay, we've talked about frustrations. Time is ticking. I want us to move on to solutions and what we should actually be doing about it. And I want David and Phil, I think you have some slides you can share, which will hopefully educate us as to what's possible a little bit. And then we'll come back to discussion to talk about how we actually make it work in our companies.
Okay, just in the next 10 minutes, we're going to talk you through how we believe you can fuse the artificial intelligence with human intelligence. With the focus, obviously, improving customer engagement, great for our CAMs, but also accelerating performance and improving skills of the teams. So as we've already discussed, we believe there's a transformation gap. And we've talked about some of the problems and challenges. So currently, the status quo would be infrequent, limited coaching, that being MSLs, CAMs. Average we talk to clients about would be 4 to 7 weeks and varies. Some of the feedback, and this is even reflected in 2 RFPs we received recently, where we've got a subjective assessment by coaches. It could be different depending on the different coach, where you are in the country. And it is more open to bias. And we'll come on to Chris's comment a bit earlier. It's more service level insights, just as we know already, there's only so much information the human can take in and observe. It tends to be a slower cycle for improvement. And actually, we know there's some tools out there that have been used historically to measure more static waves of effectiveness over time. We believe there's a future where you augment AI, conversation intelligence, where it's more regular observation, more supportive of the individual, drives self-awareness individuals, and actually supports the first-line managers, whether that be medical or gain commercial. It provides a more objective view because machine learning is AI, and David will go through the tech side. It has much less bias. So to Chris's point, I believe it'll be a good discussion to debate afterwards. You can gain a lot deeper insights, which are again much more actionable. It's a faster cycle, and eventually we believe there's a model whereby progressively this can be actually measuring effectiveness, but in a way whereby you're supporting the teams in field. And ultimately, we believe this is again around augmenting and empowering individuals and the coaches going forward. And we believe it again, looking at other industries areas, it's time to start to look at things like sports science areas where you're looking to use those types of methodologies to improve in-field performance. So just how does the model work? So the AI solution really looks at text, voice, visual. Every 15 minutes, there's lots of data points that are consumed. And the way it works is the Kai model is actually tuned, and it's solely focused on healthcare communications, pharmaceutical engagement, but also it's been used, and it shows the confidence we have between patients and doctors to improve their consultations. So what does it measure? So the DNA of the AI itself measures engagement, emotion, the sentiment, how it's received by the customer, how confident you are maybe in handling objections to support, the energy levels in the call, and the speaker balance. So getting the balance between listening or actually are you talking. And each of these programs can be tuned to the coaching frameworks, engagement models, different diseases, product specific, from rare diseases right through to mass market. Many metrics are measured: objection handling, questioning, timing, stacking. So lots of things can be measured. And the key, this is about augmenting, as we say, the humans, providing that objectivity and greater visibility to the coaches and individuals. So we believe there are 3 user cases, and it comes on to the change management really. Coaching and training, where you're actually providing more objective coaching and greater visibility to the first line leaders and also to the individuals, so that it can be used for leader coaching. CAM MSLs by producing monthly reports, so as opposed to maybe having a field visit every 4 to 7 weeks, you've got an aggregated report which can work alongside and supplement that in-field visit. Or actually you can move that to macro level and have a really objective training needs analysis. Well, you can move that eventually into a more agile, progressive model looking at in-field effectiveness, as opposed to some of the more traditional once-a-year ways of conducting audits. And then the other side of this is actually we're looking to use it for actually just extracting customer insights, real-time sentiment customer insights from KOL, KE insights, and HCPs. And this lastly, the question is, how does it actually work in practice? So there's an app on the phone which can be used by the CAMs and by the MSLs, which can be in the field, or you can use Zoom and remote, gets uploaded, multilingual. So at the moment, we're working over 50 languages, using the Kai platform. And really, there are three key outputs, either single conversation reports that can be actually used to analyze self-awareness by the CAM MSL, or coaching session with the first line managers, single aggregated reports looking at Power BI dashboards, or ultimately aggregating all that data into a team report or national report going forward. But I suppose that gives you an idea of the flow. David's going to talk a little bit more about how this works technology-wise.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the technology, and I'm going to pick up on some of the points that that Chris made about being skeptical, which you're right to be, by the way, Chris. You're quite right, and everyone should be skeptical. I think, you know, and Sarah's comment about generative AI, I think, is also pertinent. I think a lot of people think AI is generative AI because it must be ChatGPT or some version of it. And obviously that's only one type of AI. If we think about the types of AI that we use in our platform, you know, we start with machine learning. We talked about that earlier. That's like a big sponge. Yeah, it soaks up lots and lots of data and then and distills out the patterns in that data and helps us predict outcomes. You've got neural networks, which you can think of as sort of an interconnected set of highways. Now that's where you start to get some of the black box stuff, because if you think about those interconnected highways, you go through a node in that network, and then you get a decision that's made or predicted as you go through that network. So that's great at looking at lots of data that have complex relationships and helping guide an outcome. But that's where some of the black box stuff comes in, because neural networks, you actually can't actually explain why you took that path. It just helps you predict that most people take it. So that's where some of the black box things that people worry about, and explainability I'll come back to, is a really, really important thing, I think, for AI. And then obviously the generative stuff, you're absolutely right, it hallucinates, but it's like a creative friend for you that can generate lots of really interesting content. But we need to be really careful how we use it. Actually, its biggest capability is its understanding of natural language. And that's the bit of it that we leverage in our platform, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So three different types of model. They all have different roles in the ecosystem. So, you know, we'll be using the generative stuff to summarize, you know, create actions, to categorize things, and we use it to speak nicely when we want to deliver recommendations and suggestions. But actually, we don't let it hallucinate. We constrain it massively in terms of what we do. We have, you know, obviously we have really interesting acoustic models around confidence, language models around sentiment. Those are machine learning based. So, you know, we use lots of data. We've got 40,000 conversations in our database. We trained it on thousands of medical conversations to fine tune it to pharma and healthcare interactions. And we use we do use some, but in very limited and specific cases, more around human connection, which has, so we look at connection and disconnection in conversations. So that's where we use that. So lots of different roles and uses, if we can move that on. So what are the considerations, though, that we need to think about? And this is really to try and answer some of your points, Chris. So accuracy is massive in terms of being able to get to what we desire, which is actionable insights. Because, you know, what we don't, we generate huge amounts of data by using AI, and that's what AI is brilliant at. You know, 200,000 data points in 15 minutes, but that's not much use to anyone, and it's certainly no use if it's not accurate in terms of spotting the words and phrases that we want to hear. You know, the key messages, the objections, and then, you know, actually combining that then with confidence and sentiments and emotion is where the richness comes in the insight. But actually, if it's not accurate, then it doesn't help us. We are a properly multilingual platform, as Chris said, And we have to deal with lots of challenges. And the reality, so one of the ones we solved for a pharma company recently was in the Middle East, where not only have you got to work in Arabic in local language, which we can do, by the way, but of course doctors also say medical words in English. And so you've actually got to have you have a multilingual platform that works in a conversation not just in Arabic but also in English, which is an interesting challenge. We think we're the world's first in solving that one. But accuracy, getting back to it, is really starting to think about how you tune and train your models, and we get to 90+% accuracy in all of our models, and we put a human in the loop quality assurance process in place to ensure that we maintain that model accuracy. And we get there because of the base training that we've done. We can get there in new treatment areas, with a specific brand message, within about 10 to 20 examples of how people say certain things, key messages that you want to see and spot. So we can get there in a very agile way. We can tune new models specifically for a new brand in about 2 weeks. So it's a pretty agile process because of the base work that we've done. On bias, we monitor bias. So every global pharma business that we've worked with goes through some kind of compliance committee. They're becoming much more sophisticated. 2 years ago, someone apologized to me for sending them their spreadsheet with a few questions on about AI. We've been through that. Now I think it's mandatory to go through the global compliance committee, and we have to explain the bias in our models based on gender, based on age, based on accent, and other, whether you wear glasses for our visual models. And I can tell you our bias, is largely, within about 5 points across those kind of demographics. So it's not huge, our bias, but we're always trying to narrow it and to improve it. And that's about the data that you have. Hallucinations, it is absolutely the point you're making about generative AI. So you need to be really careful how you use it. And we massively constrain it. So we use the language components of it. We're not trying to generate new content with it. So I think that's a really important point. So it's a great tool. It can do some amazing things. And then the final point is privacy. Everyone gets to privacy is the barrier here. You have to consent to do the processing that we do. Actually, it's no different to what you hear every day in a contact center. We record and analyze calls for monitoring and training purposes. It's that simple, and that's actually the root of our work that we do with the NHS. Was people said this is a massive barrier. People will never say yes to this. So we went and talked to a whole bunch of clinicians, said, look, this is what we're doing. What do you think? And they turned around and said, wow, this is amazing. Can we use it with patients? And we were actually presenting for the NHS up at the GP conference last week, showing how we increased patient experience by 25% by doctors using this with their patients and becoming aware of how they were engaging with patients. So privacy is important. You have to have consent of both parties because it's really important from a rep point of view as well. But again, these things are easy to overcome if you've got the right mindset. So I think it's the change challenge that we'll probably talk about more. So all of this stuff is great, but if it doesn't get to action, if it doesn't get to specifics, then it's not conversation intelligence. It's just conversation data. And so Phil talked about the insights dashboard. So we worked really hard to try and surface the key insights, the critical moments, as Neo Optima would say, about what we do. We create suggestions. And to your point about explainability earlier, what we do is we show the observation. So we have a white box, not a black box. So we say, we saw this, and as a result, we suggest you do this. So I saw that you spoke too much, David, my common problem. And I suggest you ask more open questions, would be the suggestion that we make. And so we don't just try and focus on improvement areas. We also say, well done, you had a great speaker balance. You asked great questions, etc. So getting that kind of on each and every conversation, and that's really the heart of behavior change that Phil talked about, which is, if I hold the mirror up, which is what our system does to an individual, and I see, oh, bugger. I used sort of 59 times again, like I always do with filler words. If that's how you get behavioral change. Yeah, I keep showing you and you go, oh yeah, I did it again, didn't I? Okay, I must do better next time. And so that's really the frequency of observation really helps you then drive through that. And then just the final part in terms of where is this stuff going, we'll very shortly be launching an AI agent that sits over the top of both our conversation database, so the conversation, your conversation itself. We've got a best practice communications library in there as well. And also we have core client materials in there. So the training that's delivered, the sales aids, and the objection handlers. And as a result of that, our AI agent, you can ask it any question you want about your conversation. How can I improve it? Why is that important? And actually, how could I actually ask a better open question or deal with that price objection in a better way? So I think that's how you can get to actionability in this and actually really make a big difference. So not only have you got the AI helping you with an AI agent, but actually then you've got all that information that a human coach can then embrace, whether it's the frontline field manager or it's an external Neo-Optima coach. So that's hopefully a little bit of bits and bytes without too much technical detail.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. You've given us the case for what we want to do with it. You've given us the case, and obviously there's a huge, bigger range, Phil, than even I realized. David, you've given us the case for why the technology is sound-ish, sound enough, and the key ways in which we can do that. What I don't currently have, the one bit that was missing for me, is how is this actually performing in practice? What are the sort of numbers that people who are genuinely adopting the system, and please be as honest as you can, seeing over a short, medium period of time, and what are the actual challenges that are happening as you put those implementations together that are happening irrespective of all of the different things that you are putting across to make sure they don't happen? And try and keep the answer short if you can. We're running out of time.
Very briefly, so we're already working with 4 of the top 10 pharma companies. We'll be 5 very soon. It does vary. There are some that have scaled to the level of over 20 markets, and they're looking at that. And there are others that are just starting the journey with 1 or 2 markets. There are some smaller companies that are obviously engaging with it, and it does vary by market. Most people are starting with maybe a global level, 2 countries.
How is it performing though in those markets?
Yeah.
That's what I'm.
And then a lot of the work at the moment is around the coaching. It's performing exceptionally well. Some of the results are very, very impressive. Most of the clients are getting very big improvements in call quality from the coaching perspective. It's augmenting what they're doing. Their first line sales managers or their medical leaders are getting very, very high responses. So that the results the clients are getting are very, very positive, because this is about augmenting, providing greater dialogue for those conversations.
Any numbers, or is that too much?
Yeah, we
So 68% increase in coaching effectiveness in terms of looking at outcomes. We've got 1 client raised revenue 300% year on year. That's an outlier. I don't expect to get that across the board, but that gives you a sense of what you can do. And on medical conversations, I think moving to multiple objectives being delivered on the same call, so multiple messages, and also 600% increase in clarity. Those are all examples from top 10 pharma companies.
Okay,
David, to your point on accuracy, Paul, am I allowed to ask a question?
You are allowed to ask a question. I just wanted to point out that I've launched another poll as well, so if people can have a look at that, go for it, Chris.
My question is about the comments you made on the sort of neural piece and the accuracy, and which technologies and which AIs you use for which purpose. So I guess what you will have observed by now in all the client work that Phil talked about was that often if you were to observe an interaction between, it doesn't really matter whether you're in sales or medical or even access sometimes, if you were to observe the interaction between the industry and the healthcare provider, the healthcare professional, at face value, it can often sound quite negative. You might be comparing a new innovative medicine against the standard of care, where the standard of care is poor. We might be talking about inadequate clinical outcomes, efficacy. We might be talking about unmet burden of disease, in the impacts on patient quality of life and so on. Quite often, we're selling against a negative, or we're influencing against a negative, or that's our in, right? That's how we gain leverage. That's how we influence prescribing behaviors. That's how we drive up the uptake of new medicines. That's how, that's part of the role of industry. And Paul's done events before on the fact that selling isn't a dirty word, right? It's all about how we do it. So I'm just curious about when that is the nature sometimes, the nuanced nature of the conversations that are being had, how good is the natural language processing wizardry on the back end to correctly interpret that scenario and that situation? Because that's something that we know that humans can usually do because we pick up on that. But how good is the computer at doing that, I guess, is my question to you. And what is the pace at which it's learning? How good was it 2 years ago? How good is it today? How good will it be in 2 years from now? Because I guess that's interesting to us as well, is where are we on the continuum?
So we're already at 90+% accuracy, which is where we are across the board on our models. That's at or better than human performance. If you gave someone the task to say, did they say the right thing or the wrong thing, or was that this topic or not? So that's where it's at today, and it'll only get better. On the terms of, if you think about a pharma conversation, the things you'll be interested in is value driving behaviors. That's what you're really trying to spot. So you've just talked about what we do is we define an unmet need. And if you look at those people that get the best outcomes in terms of changing behaviors of physicians or getting them to commit to changed behaviors, you want to hear the physician acknowledge an unmet need. And normally that's around some patient characteristic. And that's what we spot for, is those specific things. And you'll tell us for your drug type, with your strategy, actually what are those things? And that's what we'll spot and surface for you. And what we have done for clients is often, we'll have a view of what that is. But actually, if you look across your cohort of CAMs or MSLs, what you can do then is actually look at the people with the best outcomes, and then you can reverse engineer back to what are the behaviors that they deliver. And then you can almost reinvent your sales model and start to get into peer-to-peer learning. So this isn't about the machine telling you, this is about you identifying what your best people are doing.
Yeah. Thank you, David. I've just ended the poll, so feel free to have a look at the results of that. Only 2% of people describe themselves as fully prepared, obviously a lot less down the bottom. What do you consider the biggest critical success factor? Again, 40% of people saying alignment with organizational goals and values, I think speaking to a couple of the points that have been made. Sarah, you've been waiting very patiently. Very keen to hear your thoughts on what you've heard. And also, most importantly, how do we make this stick? How do we actually go from these lovely discussions that we're having today? Is it a simple matter of picking up the phone and giving David and Phil a call? What is the preparation work, the key work that you think needs to be done at home before picking up that phone?
Very good question. I just want to echo something that David said. The proof is in the pudding, essentially. So I would find those proof points, not perhaps the after the years, but the things that stick and that work, and then work backwards to say, it could be, well, okay, sorry, I'm actually going from the technology back. Sorry, let me reword that. First of all, finding what good looks like. So I always like to, whenever I'm trying to drive change within the organization, adopting new technology, adopting new ways of working, I like to take the organization on a journey. Where are we in 6 months or 12 months time, and then reverse engineer back. So if we see what do we want to achieve, or where do we want to be in 12 months time, look back, how have we gotten there, and then break down the elephant, break it down into smaller pieces, and say, this is how we're going to get there. Who are the milestones? And then with that, you have the milestones at which you can benchmark against, and that have we achieved this? Have we achieved what we wanted to achieve by adopting these new technologies? And often, it could be on a more internal level, or it could be on a tech level, or you have to work within the barriers, or within what you identify as roadblocks, and work to resolve them. And I think that really is a key, not only for AI specifically, but adopting any new change or any new technology in an organization.
Thank you. Yeah, speaking of barriers, there's a new question on the screen all about barriers. Thank you, Sarah. You're giving me radio DJ-esque segues here, which I really appreciate. So thank you for that.
I just wanted to say one couple of things. I think the key to this is recognizing, do we really think as clients, I haven't been a client for quite a long time, that the model of behavioral change is having some kind of field visit every 7 weeks so we can get real behavioral change? Or do we think there's a better way of doing it? Because I think we're letting down the CAMs and MSLs, thinking actually, an oncology company recently told me this week, we go out every 7 to 8 weeks. The FLM hasn't got enough visibility of the day-to-day behaviors to really make a difference consistently. So that's the thing. Can we help them? Is that a problem? I think it is with any other industry. If you want to be a better coach, most coaches from sports, any dance coach, etc., have information and data. So all the football's a great example, not a footballer, but they use a lot of data science to look at the behaviors of their players. So again, how do we at Neo believe you can use the data to complement and improve the coaching, which then has a knock-on effect to improving the CAM and the MSL's work? So is there a problem there? Most people would say yes if they looked in the mirror.
Yeah. And is that the one thing, I mean, we're coming up to the end of our discussion, unfortunately, but is that the one thing that if you could wave a magic wand, you would change? It would just be this recognition that the status quo is unacceptable. And, you know, even if you are somewhat reticent to invest in this technology, what you're currently investing in is even poorer of a substitute. Yeah.
I'd like to see the industry not in the commercial this area, not lag behind all what's possible, given what is there and what can be done. And this is about change management, about supporting, augmenting, not replacing, and that's a key mindset change, but recognition that we can make a big difference to the individuals, to the coaches, by using data like any other industry, any other sport. And I think that is critical to us to see the change.
Bill,
So my question on
that's the solution though, right? Is you just presented the solution. It's interesting reading the chat today. Most of the discussion is about change, right? As the dynamic, a resistance to it, willingness to embrace it, and so on. So I guess, I mean, the solution is there. It's not easy, but grass and nettle, we've got to be transparent, right? In how we introduce this technology. We have to be willing to be very open about the purpose of this technology and what we're going to do with the data and who's going to see it. You know, and how often, and how are we mitigating the shortcomings that David, you talked about earlier. I think the transparency piece, if we get that wrong, then you kind of lose the permission, I think, to experiment with this technology in your organization and use it effectively. The other one maybe is like go slow to go fast, a little bit almost tempering the ambition a bit. Like I think, David, you mentioned earlier that in contact centers, this is ubiquitous now, right? This call may be recorded for training and monitoring purposes. We've all heard that so many times that we've memorized that line in our head. But it wasn't always the case, not even in contact centers, and now it is, and it wouldn't have happened overnight. So there's just maybe some practical things around as you introduce this internally within organizations, you know, how you kind of create that step change, you know, experimenting with it internally before in a customer context. I'm imagining with a CAM or an MSL team, only show the CAM their own data. Don't even show their manager for the first 3 months, right? High trust. If you don't like it, delete it, whatever. We have nothing to hide. We're not doing this to leverage it as a stick to beat you. I just think there's some, you know, like they're not easy, but there's some simple things that we can do to build trust and build transparency in the way we do this.
But all of those things, Chris, are once you've decided to implement. Yeah. And you yourself said just before we went live that you've had some budgetary pressure applied upon your good self in recent moments. And what is it that's going to get you and the company, you know, over that mindset hurdle and actually trying this for all the reasons that we've talked before? What's that very first step? And by the way, I'll end this poll in 5 seconds and we'll have a look at what everyone else thinks about barriers. But Chris, sorry.
I mean, firstly, it can't cost of acquisition. You know, I think the technology vendors need to recognize that the environment they're operating in, that there is a degree of skepticism that this isn't going to be an easy journey necessarily. So, you know, budgets within companies, we could spend it on this, we could spend it on something else. You know, the rate at which we see a return. You know, I'm not sure that this is different necessarily to other investments that we look at making in the, you know, the sort of sales and marketing arena or in the field force effectiveness arena. I just think that piece around being mindful and having a step change approach to how we introduce it and understanding, and Sarah said the words earlier, what good looks like, you know, in each phase, starting small investments, experiment, then scale, and so on. This will be ubiquitous. In 10 years' time, you'll be doing this webinar and we'll all be talking about how we've all been doing it for years. And and it's no big deal. So it will happen, but yeah, probably the investment needs to start small and graduate, and not cost $10 million in year one, right?
Sorry, David and Phil, can't charge them. They won't. Sorry. We've only got 2 minutes left. Thank you so much for this. I'm just going to stop this current poll and have a quick look at the results there. You know, we can see where the audience thinks. So it is that mindset that's getting 20% up, but limited internal understanding. So knowing what we don't know, as we've talked about before, 36% of votes there. And then Chris, it's kind of funny that you, oh, looks like my camera's dying here, but hopefully you can still hear me. The question which you actually suggested, which is quite funny given the budget situation that we've got going on here, what are the competing interests? And actually, the joint highest vote is unsure, which is quite interesting. So there you go. That's very interesting. 2 minutes left. You've all got one sentence each. I've already kind of put Chris on the spot as to what he would do if he was in charge and had to make sure that this investment was going to happen. Let me just give you each one more sentence as to what you think the Monday morning activity you can make is to actually. Sorry, I'm just looking at James Harper's amusing comments about me being an AI avatar. I promise you I am real, for those of you who haven't met me. Yeah. What is your Monday morning thing to do? One sentence each. So who wants to go first?
Okay.
Go for it.
Help people understand the benefits of what we've been discussing today, but also recognize, to Chris's point about budgets, this is a very small percentage of a very high cost human being that you can enhance their performance with. And I think that's what should be taken away, which is Chris's understanding of what's possible with AI to improve the heavy resource you have and improve that, help them grow, help those individuals grow, both the coaches and the individuals themselves.
I wanted to add on to that, Phil. I would be asking everyone, what's the cost of remaining idle? Things are changing at a rapid pace. If we stay idle, what is the cost of actually not doing anything and continuing the way we are doing it today? We're seeing increasing market access barriers. We see that our customers, that the hospitals want us to go digital. We need to improve exceedingly higher costs in terms of human resources, the human effect. We need to do this in order to remain relevant.
David, it looks like you got the final word.
Yeah, the tangible thing you can do if you're really interested is you can try this for yourself and see whether it makes a difference to you. So, you know, we're always happy to do a free go so that you can see the benefits. There you go. That's my last little sales pitch. In reality, though, I'm back with Phil. You can massively accelerate performance improvement doing it the new way, not the old way. That's probably the message I would put to you. And actually, the gains are substantial. They're really substantial. Yeah.
Well, I hope you are preaching to converted here, in that we're all here to support the inevitable, as Chris put it, march of this happening. Back and laugh that we were even talking about it back in 2024, how parochial we were. I realize you can't see me, but you'll just have to imagine me looking very gracious as I thank our panel for their time and their energy and their insights. And also thank you to the audience, especially those of you who were telling rude jokes in the chat window on the side as we were going through it all. Much appreciated. Obviously, really appreciate having your time here and wishing you the best of luck in actually embracing this technology. I do recommend giving David or Phil a shout if indeed you are ready and willing to embark upon this journey. They've been great partners to work with in making sure this webinar happened. So very much recommend that going forward. Thanks, everyone. I'll let you go. You're a minute late for your next meeting already. Can't make you any more. Thanks a huge amount for being here. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.